Good evening and welcome to the Raben Report. I'm your host, Elliot Raben, so get ready to get triggered. Good evening and welcome to the Raben Report's live election special on the Canadian federal elections, our part 3 of 3 on our series. I'm your host, Elliot Raben, and with me is my expert panel, Amara, Samuel, and Jessica. How are you guys?
Great, excited.
Good.
Ready for this election?
Yes.
Yeah.
We'll see. Okay. So on top of that, not only do we have our expert panel, but we have some extra special guests, and they are Christina. Hi, Christina.
Hi.
Jake Benaim.
Hey.
And we have last minute edition. Thank you, Morella. We have Morella. How are you?
Sorry, it's
Moralia. My apologies.
No worries.
Moralia. See how last minute it is? So thank you all for being here. Tonight we're doing a live election special episode right on election night. This is a pivotal night and therefore a pivotal show. And you're not going to want to miss it. In this jam-packed 2-hour program, we'll be talking everything from the current state of Canada to party platforms and what the impact of this election will mean for the country. As the show goes on, we'll be reading your live Facebook comments on air, and thanks to our gracious sponsor, Elvira Caria, we'll be giving away a special prize, so you better stay tuned because it's a good one. You'll only be able to win by watching and commenting, so again, stay tuned. Before we get into it, the opinions expressed are not those of Ryerson or Ryerson faculty and are only those of the individual commentators. Viewer discretion is advised. Now, today's show will be a bit different in terms of format. Normally, we'd have a 5-minute recap followed by our main topic. This episode will focus strictly on the election and will be divided into sections. We'll talk, again, the last 4 years under Trudeau, key issues and key ridings, and the most realistic final outcome of the election, especially since polls are closing at 9:30 here, but when the show finishes, the polls still won't have closed in British Columbia, so hopefully we'll be able to call the election by then. But let's begin by getting to know our guests for those who don't know. Christina, why don't we start with you? Tell us a little about yourself, your political views. Don't tell us who you voted for in 2015, that's coming up later, but just a little about you.
So in May, I graduated from McMaster for combined honors in political science and communication studies. I recently started a new job at a PR agency, so working woman now.
Amazing.
And my political stance is left. Used to be a bit far left. I'd say I'm closer to the center now. Do you want to know my party?
Yeah, no, I just hear a sound in there. Do you guys hear that?
Is it music?
In the
Yeah.
background.
There's music coming from...
Do you want to just turn that down on that other headset that nobody's using?
Sure. I guess. It is down.
Yep.
That's weird. It's like the room directly beside us.
Are they live?
No, it's just the speaker that gets left on in the Spirit Live studio.
Okay.
For the music play.
Yeah.
Well-
Is it really distracting?
Yeah, a little bit. So just, Jake, you want to pop in there and just turn off that music?
That's annoying.
Yeah. See, the Raben Report is dealing with, see, there's the music. You can hear it now. So amazing. This is why we have Jake. Thank you so much, Jake. Clearly, we're off to, a little rocky start, but it's okay. That's the Raben Report for you. But when Jake gets back in his seat, Jake, thank you for doing that. Now let's get to know you.
I got you.
Thank you. Let's get to know you a little bit for our viewers who don't know. You've been on the show once before.
Oh,
and,
have I?
Yeah.
Oh, trip down memory lane.
Tell us about yourself.
I'm Jake. I am caffeinated, and that's important. Everything else is just a bonus. I am a 4th-year student in media production at RTA, and I like pina coladas, long walks on the beach, and getting caught in the rain, all that jazz. And I don't really identify with any specific political ideology. I'm kind of wishy-washy in that way. So don't call me undecided. Call me indecisive.
Will do.
Trademark that.
Anything for you, Jake. And finally, our last edition, Moralia. Tell us a little about yourself.
I studied public policy for a couple years. I'm very interested in politics. I studied politics from a very young age, and it's something that really compels me and I think is really meaningful. In terms of where I lean to, it really depends on whichever party really supports the values I care about, especially in terms of labor, healthcare. The Canadians that really are the backbone of this country matter. And I think that's an important part of Canada.
Excellent. We really appreciate you being here, and
Thank
that
you for having me.
Thank you. And that opinion that you said, not necessarily just supporting a party blankly, but somebody who fights for your issues is what we're all here doing, right? We're not all here supporting a party blindly. We care about the issues, and we're going to talk about them for you tonight. So thank you all for introducing yourselves. Now that we've gotten to know them, let's get right into our main topic, the Canadian federal election. We're going to start with the last 4 years, 2015 to 2019. On October 19th, 2019, which was just 2 days ago, Justin Trudeau got a majority Liberal government. He got elected with a lot of support, and people were really excited. Let's go around and see who everyone voted for in 2015. Amara, let's start with you.
So in 2015, I was too young to vote.
Okay, so you weren't
I
able
didn't
to vote? Okay.
Because I couldn't.
Mhm.
I would have. But I would have voted for Trudeau if I could have voted.
Okay.
I was 150% Team Trudeau in 2015.
Fair enough. Like a lot of people were. Right?
Yes.
Jessica, you were also too young to vote?
Too young, but
Too
again, 100% Team Trudeau.
Mm-hmm. Sam?
I was eligible to vote. I was 18. I just recently turned 18. I had just begun getting into politics, and I voted for Harper.
Okay. Let's move on to Christina.
In 2015, I voted for Tom O'Kerr.
Okay. Jake?
I was still too young to vote in 2015, but I likely would have sided with the Liberals.
Okay. And finally, Moralia.
So that year, I did not want to vote. I didn't feel any connection with any of the leaders of the party. And frankly, I just didn't go to the voting polls.
Wow. So you didn't vote. You don't feel that voting would have made a difference at all, even if it was for...
Definitely not in my writing.
Not on your writing? And what was
I'll
your
hop onto that. I don't think my vote would have counted if I had made it,
Yeah.
specifically in my riding, but we can jump back into that later.
Yeah,
But you should still vote.
Yeah,
But,
definitely.
you know.
But
Yeah.
vote if you feel a connection with, I think, the leaders in your writing, especially if you know their platforms and the party's leaders' platforms. That's an important one.
I think you always should vote.
Agreed.
Like, make an educated guess with a person that feels like is the most connected to your values and to your beliefs and who you feel would do the best job in your mind. I don't think it's any you can't have any opinion and you don't have any business not voting.
Yeah, every vote counts, right? Okay, now moving forward, what have the last 4 years been like under Trudeau? As mentioned, he was elected on October 19th, 2015. He promised an end to the Harper era. He created a gender-neutral cabinet, promised to legalize marijuana, and offer a fresh face to politics. Over the course of those 4 years, what happened? We had, where are we now? Because on top of all those positive things, we had a bunch of scandals like the SNC-Lavalin scandal, his trip to India, blackface that just came out. So let's talk about the beginning to now. Who wants to take it?
I can take it.
Yeah.
Last 4 years, we had a very handsome prime minister. I think a lot of young women who are voting, I will totally admit, were kind of persuaded by that because he was very charismatic and there was something about him. I didn't vote for him, but at the time when I did vote, even though I voted Mulcair, I wasn't mad about Trudeau winning, and I think after some time I realized that that's who I wished I had voted for. But I mean, weed was legalized, great. That's like one of the only good things I can say. I think that's not true. I think he's done a lot of good things. All scandals are gonna like outweigh the positives, right? But I think it's been kind of 50-50. I think some good things have happened, but obviously there's been a lot of scandal, and he's a bit he is problematic fully. Yeah.
Let's talk about that gender neutral cabinet though, because at the start he was talking about how he's a feminist and he wants to empower women, and now we're at the point where 4 women left his caucus, left his party. What do you think about that?
Okay, I can weigh in on this again. I have a bit of a problem with that, and I think this is something that happens a lot of the time, is like this desire to like appear as if you're like representative of, like his whole thing was it's 2015, that's why I have women in my cabinet, and it's like I don't think that I think these women were tokens. And I think that happens a lot, is putting people into this position to make yourself look better. And if 3 women left, I can't say they were happy in their position. I think it was a token for representation, and it didn't actually mean anything.
Just going off of that, 'cause I agree with that point completely. Speaking of the standpoint of 2015, and even speaking of the standpoint of 2019, we should move past the idea that we have women in our cabinet, like women are tokens. That's not feminism. That's just objectification on a different level. It's just covering it as the idea of, we're pro women. Everybody should be pro women. A woman in cabinet should not be some random and some fantastic ideal. It should just be something that is a given, and it should be something that is accepted and is known. It shouldn't just be all men. It shouldn't just be all women. Like, why do you have to categorize by gender? It should just be about the empowerment of equality. It shouldn't just be, we have women, look at us. Because obviously they were there and they were tokens, and that's why they left. So it didn't do anything for it.
Yeah, that's the problem with quotas and affirmative action and programs like that. It's not like you should get the best person for the job, and the best person for the job could easily be a woman or a visible minority. Those aren't like 2 mutually exclusive things, but you shouldn't be looking for a woman or a visible minority. You should be looking for the best person for the job.
Exactly.
I feel like it's also demeaning.
It is.
It's like
incredibly.
It makes you like.
Makes you look like you got the job just because you're a woman.
No, exactly. Mm-hmm. And it doesn't, I don't see equality in that. It is like, it does, when I see those kinds of things, it's like, is this really a step for women or minorities, or am I just being used as some it's not, I know. Yeah. So it's like, we don't get anywhere with it.
That's not
the
feminism.
optics of having a gender parity, equitable, that aside,
cabinet,
cabinet.
No worries.
Having that aside, though, do you think that any of the specific appointments that he made to that cabinet were done in error? Because in a lot of ways, a lot of the cabinet ministers that were selected were chosen for a variety of backgrounds and specific interest and experience they had in those portfolios, which is, again, not necessarily something that needs to be promoted. I think that it's just something that we can hopefully work towards the day where having that in the exact same way is not something that has to become a big deal, because it's just a norm that we can come to expect as a means of
and I think
having
that's the goal
equity.
of feminism.
Yeah. Or all equality movements.
Exactly. So
Yeah.
I'm curious if that particular move, being positive, both addressed positively and negatively in ways, really pertains to the Liberal government trying to push that as their identity, or the root of the goodness of what they were, the intent behind what they were trying to do.
Right. I don't know if it was necessarily done in error. I think just the way that I see it is, and just with like the whole like Trudeau's whole appearance and everything, like I think that was a big thing for him, was appearance. So not that it was necessarily done in error, because I don't know that much about each member of like the cabinet, and so I'm not going to discredit them. I think appearance wise, I can, and especially if 3 women left, I can say that maybe there was some error to it, because a lot of it was motivated by, you know, wanting to look good socially.
I think personally, I saw his platform being as progress, being as very enlightened and very new and very fresh and very different. So when people vote, they want change, most importantly. That's what they really want. And what his platform at the time showed is electoral reform. It showed difference. It shows something that is completely drastic of Harper's record and his platform. And I think people thought that Canada was moving in baby steps in the past, and now is taking bigger leaps towards more progress, more important reforms for Canada, and I guess more platforms for progressives, right? Because a lot of progressives got more to say than they did in the past.
Fair point. Let's move on now to talk about the legalization of marijuana. That obviously helped with the younger vote.
Yeah.
But the way that it was done, you said, yeah
right
away?
I was going, like, I couldn't vote, but I would have voted for Trudeau, mostly because I thought he was attractive and he was going to legalize weed. I couldn't vote. I was too immature to vote. It worked. I didn't make the same decision this time, but that's why I would have voted for him.
Wow. You said thank God, Sam. But like, but just like you said, every vote counts, right?
Yeah.
No, every vote doesn't count, though, in our electoral system.
It doesn't? But one vote could change the
it
outcome.
could, like, theoretically, but it doesn't really. Like, if you're in a riding that's going to go, like, pretty, like, you can be pretty sure it's going to go one way, you could not vote, and it's not going to make a difference. Or you could vote for that party, and it's still not going to make a difference.
But that's the problem in itself. Like, that comes with the mentality of, oh, my vote doesn't make a difference.
That's the problem with our electoral system.
Yeah, like, oh, my vote doesn't make a difference, and then so somebody else, oh, my vote doesn't make a difference, and it becomes a domino effect of my vote doesn't make a difference, and then no young people are going out to vote, and then we have all these old people, and they're making all the conservative decisions.
I just think electoral reform should have happened, and that would have changed that.
Oh, for sure. No, I think so, too. But
because it was something he promised, and then he didn't deliver, right?
No, for sure. I 100% agree with that, but still, like, the situation that we're in right now, every vote matters.
Yeah, I think you should vote. I'm not telling people not to vote, but and every vote does matter. You know, they are, like, it could be a matter of one vote, but most of the time it isn't.
I think that kind of raises a good point, though, with the idea of being realistic of the circumstances where your vote is counting towards, and you don't have to pretend that your vote is the one that's going to make all the difference. But at the same time, not taking for granted the right that you're given with the ability to vote, and how important that is for you to exercise that, regardless of whether it's you're exercising that as a means of being satisfied with the candidate, or going in and making the effort to go in and then choosing none of the candidates as a means of showing. If you really want to protest the fact that you're dissatisfied with the candidates, make the effort to go to your polling station, register to vote, and then on your ballot write that you are voting for none of those candidates, and really make something that people are going to take notice of.
For sure. And as just going off of that, like the whole idea of voting and everything, as like women who were denied that right to vote for so long, I think, you know, we owe it to our suffragettes, and we owe it to all the strong women in our past that fought for our right to have that. So I think it's not only are we doing our civic duty and we're doing something that really matters, it's also as like an homage and a respect to the women that fought for us to be able to have that right and to be able to have that abilities.
And also one thing,
not for me.
One thing
Are we talking about like suffragettes? Is that what you meant?
Yeah.
Well, white women got the right to vote.
Yeah, it wasn't all women.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think to add to that, also, and this is just kind of reflecting on the politics of the world right now. It's not necessarily related, but when you look at what's happening in Chile right now, with protests and all this inequality in the country, and you see the states that other countries are in, and the rights that we have that they don't, and voting is something that some people in some countries can only dream of. It's like completely out of reach. And I think we have to look at world politics and look at our position. The fact that we even have the opportunity to vote is amazing in itself. And even if I understand that maybe your vote doesn't count. And I can say that I felt that way before too. But if everyone says that their vote doesn't count, then that's a mentality that, everyone starts to think that, and then people don't go out and vote. And I don't know. All I'm saying is it's a right that a lot of people in other countries don't have, and we should take advantage of that because it's an amazing opportunity to have.
It's democratic.
Yeah, I agree 100%. We should recognize that we have the right to vote. But I just think we can also be realistic about what our votes actually mean.
Yeah.
I'd also like to thank everyone that has voted today because it's really important to vote, to express yourself, because we have a country with a strong democracy. And I'm very thankful for that. I'm thankful for everyone who spoke their rights, spoke about their rights and their right to vote.
You know what else I'm surprisingly thankful for? I'm still one of those old teenagers that uses Facebook on a regular basis.
Oh,
but
me too.
I'm surprised. Facebook did a really great job of really promoting all of their voting and election based content and encouraging other people to do the same.
I haven't seen it like that before.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I've never seen. Granted, I haven't been of age of voting for a while, so that may influence what I'm seeing. But I've never seen a more socially active feed based on people who are going out and spreading the word not only about voting but just showing that they did, which is
there's like a badge you can put on your status that says I voted today. And I mean it's all, I guess it's just social media, and what does that really mean? But it's still spreading a message that it's something that's important to us, like and that and I'm sure in some way someone's going to see that and be like, maybe I'll actually get up and vote. And even if it influences one or two people who are friends with you on Facebook, it's done its job, right?
Yeah, and even not only being more active in promoting voting, but Facebook has been cracking down on political ads and activism. For example, just to boost a post of the Raben report, Facebook has to know exactly who I am. So I had to send them a picture of my driver's license. They had to send me a letter in the mail with a code to then input on Facebook. And when the boost goes out, it says paid for by Elliot Max Raben, which, trying to be humble here, I'm not trying to show that I paid for it, but Facebook has to know all these things because anything that pertains to political activism or social activism now has to prove who they are.
Right.
So not only, again, I'm just adding to Jake's point, not only are they being more impactful on encouraging, but they're also cracking down. But let's move forward to talk about the Conservative Party and the NDP during the 4 years that Justin Trudeau was in power. Mainly about their leadership. They saw major changes. We had Rona Ambrose, who was the interim leader of the Conservative Party. And then we got Andrew Scheer as the official leader of the opposition. And with the NDP, we had Tom Mulcair, which then changed to Jagmeet Singh. So let's talk a little bit about Rona Ambrose and Tom Mulcair. Sam, do you want to talk about Rona Ambrose and her impact on the party?
Sure. So she was appointed head of the party after the 2014 election. Sorry,
2015.
2015 election.
Once Stephen Harper resigned. Yeah.
Yeah, and her main impact, and I think the reputation she gained in the party was her influence, specifically during question period in the House of Commons, because she was very good at holding the majority government to account and to question their decisions. And it was oftentimes her speeches and her questions were placed all over the media because she was very passionate about her party's beliefs and, really held the government to account.
Do you find that if she were a leader today that she could win a majority government or that she could win a minority government easier than Andrew Scheer?
Yeah, I think she definitely had some qualities that Andrew Scheer probably doesn't. But I think elections are a whole different beast. I mean, there's scandal and different pressures. But do I think that she would have performed better? Probably. Yeah.
Probably. Okay. I honestly felt that she was a very good look for the party. A strong woman in charge of the Conservative Party. It's not something that you would think to see, right?
I think she would have done a lot better than Scheer just because she's a woman.
Mm-hmm.
I think the potential of having, our first real female prime minister would have been a really good
we had Kim Campbell.
I know, that's not real.
I get where you're coming at with that.
Well, I mean, if we're being honest, we're not fake news here, but I get what you mean, because she was only prime minister for how long? 3 months?
Yeah, I think
3 months, yeah.
that.
Well, let's move on to the NDP. Now, Christina, you were a very strong supporter of the NDP at the time, right, in 2015?
Yes,
let's talk about Tom Mulcair as leader and your support for the party.
So I think my vote was more motivated by the party itself rather than Tom Mulcair, because I think after the fact I realized that I didn't like him, and it was kind of too late. And I also think that, so in 2015 I was 18, and I can admit that at that age I didn't make the most educated choice with my vote. I think it gets really exciting and you get really motivated by feelings and emotions, and after the fact I think I did regret my vote.
Really?
Yeah, but I was happy Trudeau was in, because then it felt as if I didn't totally screw the whole system up, because my vote didn't change anything. But I still, for a while I took a break and I did not like NDP. For a couple years there in between Mulcair and this election, just based on my political views kind of shifting. But I don't know, Jugmeat kind of won my heart over again. So
yeah, well, that was his goal, right? He said he wanted to win the hearts of people. Now, Amara, you are not a fan of Jugmeat.
No, I'm not.
No,
I think he did a lot of campaigning to young people. He did TikToks and stuff.
Yeah, I was going to talk about that. He did 2 TikToks, and it's wow, you're reaching a very much younger demographic.
Yeah, that's true.
Right?
But that feels like pandering to me. I feel like
so?
Young people tend to be more to the left. They tend to be more liberal, and I think he really capitalized on that. I don't think he's genuine. I don't think his campaign was very. I mean, I don't think he's lying about his beliefs or what he's planning on doing. I just feel like I guess he's just capitalizing a lot on things that he didn't control.
And young people are very idealistic and impressionable, and it's really easy to get votes out of people who feel a connection with you.
Yeah, so all you have to do is make a TikTok, and then young people will vote for you.
I think that's what happened to my vote in 2015, though. I think I was easily persuaded, and I can say, I'm 22 now, and I think that the decision that I made is the most, well, obviously this is the second election I'm voting in, but oh my God, sorry, there's a bunch of people at the window, some very important people.
Oh my God. Do you, wow.
Can you
okay,
zoom in
hold on,
that?
I'm about to, hold on, where are they? Hold on.
Get them to wave.
Look.
If you can even see them.
Where'd they go?
The reflection might be.
Wrong window. I can't, hold on.
Which one?
5, hold on.
They point to me.
Yeah, right there. Right there. I don't know if you can see them, but that's Marshall, Daniel, and Adam all at the window who came to watch the show. Oh, man, that's so nice of them. Oh,
the loves of my life.
They're amazing.
Major throwback.
Literally, that was just shock.
Yeah, I don't even remember what I was saying. Oh, I think my vote now at 22 is a lot more, it was a lot more educated, and I had 4 years of studying politics in between. And I'm happy with the decision I made this time around. But I can say that I definitely at that age was so impressionable. Anything social or as left as it got that I heard, I was all over it. And that's because you don't really know where. At 18, I can't say that you know where you fall socially. And I think that changes it can change your whole life. But I think especially in your teens.
I think the same thing happened with a lot of young people in 2015 with Trudeau's first run.
Everyone wanted weed to be legalized. All the 18-year-olds and all the 18-year-olds that voted for him were just like, they loved the idea of marijuana being legalized.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, it is 9:36 p.m. and that means that the polls in Ontario and parts of Quebec have just closed 6 minutes ago. So let's do a poll check-in. Yep.
Polls from Manitoba to Saskatchewan and Alberta have already closed as well.
Wow.
Really? Yeah. We got all of them already? Okay. Let's do a poll check-in starting with the Atlantic provinces. Now, who has the Atlantic provinces pulled up?
I actually don't see the results for Saskatchewan.
The polls just closed. So
they just
only
closed.
The ones that are very clearly leaning. None have been called yet from the 9:30 poll closes. Okay. But if you're looking at Atlantic Canada, I don't remember who
it's
was
saying that
going,
it's
but going right in.
It's Liberal right now.
It's Liberal?
Yeah. Atlantic Canada in the 2015 election had a clean sweep of every single riding went Liberal. Right now, they're not sitting as well, but obviously they have, I guess, some leeway room to lose. They're projecting 24 of those seats to go Liberal, about 4, give or take, for Conservative, 1 New Democrat, 1 from the Bloc, which is interesting, and 1 for the Green Party, which is a new pickup.
In the Atlantics?
Leading.
The Bloc is in the Atlantics?
Yes.
In New Brunswick.
Wow. I was not aware of that.
They're up to 4 right now, what I'm seeing.
Yeah, once Quebec starts rolling in, they'll get some leadings really quickly.
It looks like 42 for Liberal. I don't know if we're seeing different numbers. There might be a little bit of a delay. And the other one I was looking at was Manitoba. Let's see.
But let's hold off on Manitoba. Let's just talk about the Atlantic provinces. So, Jake, as you were saying, it was a clean Liberal sweep in 2015, and now we've got some NDP in there and some Conservative potentially.
I think most of the biggest chunk coming out of that is the Conservative.
Yeah.
With one right now leading with NDP and the Bloc. But I think the Green Party candidate is the most interesting. Her name is Jenica Atwin. She's currently at 35% of the vote, 1,000 votes, give or take, above the next candidate behind her, which is a Conservative. Which I think is kind of
so the Greens ahead of the Conservative.
Yeah, the incumbent was obviously Liberal and is trailing in third right now. So I think it's obviously a great possible win for the Greens, but a very clear indication of the early worries that a lot of people on the left were looking at with those vote cracking, of if these small pockets that might have more easily gone to a Liberal or even an NDP in certain ridings start spreading throughout those 3 more left-leaning parties, is that going to do something almost to the detriment of any not conservative government as the rest of the polls come in? So it's curious to see.
And there hasn't been any seats called. Like, nothing has been confirmed
in the
yet,
Atlantics,
right?
A good number of them have been called.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so that's what I was reading out earlier. I'm pretty sure that's what I'm looking at. I
think they're far enough along in their counting that the ones that are leading have a pretty good chance of winning.
Yeah.
It's all of the 9:30 calls now that are just leading. None have been forecasted for sure just yet.
Yeah.
Okay, so we've got the Atlantic provinces, Newfoundland and Labrador, PEI, New Brunswick, Nova Scotia, and in total, is it still looking majority Liberal?
Not for Manitoba.
We're not there yet.
Okay.
For the Atlantic,
but the Atlantic,
provinces.
Just for the ones that I'm looking at. Sorry, I would
say 3 out of 4 for Liberals. Which
okay,
is
so they're
obviously a step down, but still a good enough direction to get them a minority they're looking for.
Yeah.
So the Liberals going into the election, they only had 15 seats over the majority requirement. So the fact that they're losing seats already, it's not necessarily a good sign for them. But let's move on further west to Quebec. Now, Moralia, you are from Quebec, correct?
I am from
you
Quebec.
Are Quebec.
So my father's side is from Beauce, and my mother's side is from Abitibi.
And Beauce is it's Maxime Bernier's riding, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And how are those ridings looking?
So Manicouagan is led by the Liberals by 6 votes versus the NDP. Bloc Québécois is leading Jonquière by 39 votes against the Conservatives. And Saint-Maurice, Champlain, the Liberals are leading Bloc Québécois by 94 votes. Beauport, Côte de Beaupré, Île d'Orléans, Charlevoix. So the Bloc Québécois is leading the Liberals by 114 votes. And for Gaspésie, les Îles de la Madeleine, the Bloc Québécois is leading the Liberals by 379 votes. And for Rimouski, Négette, Témiscouata, Les Basques, the Liberals are leading the Bloc Québécois by 20 votes. Okay. For Beauce, the PPC is leading by 35% versus Richard Lehoux by 29%.
And he's conservative?
He is.
Okay,
well, no, Bernier is... do you think he's expected to win that seat?
He has a strong base.
Well, hasn't his family held that seat for the last 20 plus years? First it was his father, and now him, right? I think you were the one telling us about that last week.
Yeah. Not only that, so there's certain last names that you hear when you come from a region that you're familiar with, just like a veilleur. A veilleur is very Beauceron. And for areas like Mégantic, l'Érable, it makes sense because it's mostly an Anglo population and it's mostly a conservative population. So you feel
the loyalty is more with the name than with the party.
Yeah, definitely.
Morale, I think you were saying how you have some relatives that when they go into the voting booth, no matter the party, they only vote based on
the
if
name.
It's a Quebecer or not.
Yeah. Well, not only that, it's just the community. If you're known in the community, if people know your name, if you're out there and people know that you've done good deeds and that you're a good person, they'll vote over the person over the party, I think, most of the time.
And what about Papineau? Do we have any results on Papineau? And for those who don't know, Papineau is Justin Trudeau's riding. He's expected to win. Yeah.
So right now we only have Honoré Mercier. We only have some on the Île de Laval, and we have Dorval, Lachine, LaSalle. So most of the island looks to be Liberal at the moment.
Okay.
As well as Pierre Boucher, Les Patriotes, Verchères. So it's Boucherville in that area. So the Liberals are leading by 13 votes. I think most of Montreal and most of the South Shore might vote Liberal.
Really, but the Bloc is making some gains in other parts of
regional
Quebec, right?
areas of Quebec. Yes, definitely.
Mm-hmm. Kind of like the Conservatives and the Liberals in Ontario, right? The Conservatives take the more regional, the more rural areas, and then the 416 goes to the Liberals normally. But we're gonna get to Ontario a little bit later as the polls closed, and obviously being in Ontario, it's probably the spiciest part for this show. But let's move on to 2019. Okay, so what are the key issues in this election? What are people voting for? Why are they voting? You know, obviously, what do you think, Amara?
I think climate change is a really, really big issue. Mm-hmm. And then probably immigration, and then maybe the economy. I was going to say indigenous issues, but I think the economy is bigger than indigenous issues in this election.
Oh, who's that?
I disagree. I think indigenous issues are way more important than the economy.
Well, I wasn't saying that they were more important. I was just saying that I think people care more about the economy than indigenous issues.
Which is a problem in itself, honestly, if you think about it. I mean, I don't think anybody, well, in my opinion, should be putting finance and economics over the well-being of people who don't even have clean water in some areas.
Well, they could go together. Like if we're talking about taxes and the way that the government spends money. They could go together.
Yeah, but I think what was promised for them and what was supposed to be done long term, that goes down to like what Trudeau didn't accomplish.
What Trudeau didn't do.
What he didn't do were huge things, like the electoral reform and indigenous communities. But he did do 90 or 92% of his he did complete 92% of his provinces. I think it was 92 or 90%. It was one
92. I think you're
92.
Right.
Yeah. So like, it's such a because like the issues that he didn't fulfill were huge, and honestly, especially when it comes to the indigenous communities, like that's that's kind of unforgivable. Something definitely should have been addressed, especially all the missing girls. But then again, like what he did accomplish a majority. So when people say, oh, he didn't accomplish anything, he technically did accomplish a majority of what he set out to accomplish.
So in terms of, I think, the media narrative or just the general understanding, I think for the most part, people are very under the belief that so far the first 4 years of a Trudeau government has been disappointing. I think that's coming from both sides of the aisle. It's just a matter of, do you think that came from the result of him not being able to fulfill some of his more important campaign promises? Or do you think that some of the shadowing from some of his more high-profile scandals, let's say, do you think contributed to that?
I think all of those.
Yeah, and I think, honestly, people were disappointed from not just some people that I was talking to. I mean, they voted Conservative, but they're like, "Oh, we're disappointed from the beginning." Of course, they're going to be disappointed they didn't vote for him. But when I have talked to a few people, just the general disappointment didn't start with SNC, and when the scandals happened, they started kind of early in his term. And so I think, honestly, when those scandals did happen, it was just, oh, see what I mean? Like, it kind of added fuel to the fire kind of thing.
Right.
So
I agree.
Yeah, I think it was a good combo of the two of them. Honestly, those scandals, obviously, no scandals would help anybody, but they really, I think they damaged a lot of people's hope in him or the ideal behind him.
I think the SNC scandal more than anything else.
Yeah, I mean, as a Liberal government backing big business, I think that is just incredibly hypocritical, and it was really why I didn't want to vote Liberal. But coming from my riding, I felt the pressure to strategically vote. I mean, I was going to vote NDP, but I really didn't want the chance of a Conservative government. And when I was looking at the polls this morning, the Conservatives were projected to be and with the advanced polls, they were in the lead. So it was one of those things where it's like, okay,
the problem with the electoral system.
Exactly, and that's what should have been reformed. Again, big issue that wasn't addressed. So yeah, Jake, going back to your point, I think both those factors put together really made for detrimental harm.
Yeah, it's the First Nations or the Indigenous issue. Everybody talked about it during the debates, and everybody says that they're for helping them, but clearly not. Sometimes it's just talk.
I don't think it's also. I also don't think it's as black and white as people like to say it is. Like the Indigenous communities in Canada, they're very varied as well. Like they're diverse. They're not all the same, and there's like you can't just give them money and expect that to fix it. Like their communities have gone through hell, really.
Yeah, no,
and they're broken at this point, and it's going to take a lot of work and dedication to fix it. I don't think you can just I don't think there's like a policy you can like wrap up neatly in a bow and say during a debate that's going to solve the Indigenous communities' issues.
Mm-hmm.
That's why you also need to have more of an open communication with these people, and we're going to solve things for you, blah blah blah. Like it comes with open communication as well,
because like there are some Indigenous groups that support pipelines, and then there are some that don't. Like they're not a monolith, right? They're all Indigenous, yes, but they're all different. So I don't even know if you could have representation that would accurately represent Canada's Indigenous peoples, because there are a lot of them.
Yeah. Now let's move on to the next topic you mentioned, Amara, which is the environment. Environment and climate change was a big topic of conversation in the debates with what was going on in the States with Greta Thunberg. It clearly dominated headlines. Did anyone vote based on climate action policy?
100%, yeah.
Yeah, I can say that.
For sure. It's not just climate change, it's a climate crisis. And when people deny climate crisis, that's when it comes that's a big issue in itself. And especially with the Conservative government, not like, first off, they didn't go to any of the protests and or implement any sort of plan of action that would help address the detrimental harm that we're doing to our environment and to our global ecosystem currently. That's a big issue in itself, and I think it was part of our civic duty and part of just our duty as humans living on this earth to vote for somebody who actually had some feasible and good and well implemented plan to attack this climate crisis that we are currently experiencing.
He does. He just bought a pipeline.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And
no, I'm not saying that Trudeau does, but he does. He has some form of policy over than. It's better than the conservative.
If it really was a crisis, and that was on top of people's minds, everyone would have voted Green because they put that as their priority. But the reality is that people vote strategically, and environment isn't on the top of their minds. It's affordability. That's
a problem, and it's like, where are we going to be if we don't have an environment?
But people have to live every day of their lives. Like, where are you
going to live if we don't have an environment?
People get the bills at the end of the day, and they see most Canadians are living paycheck to paycheck, and even a small interest rate change would be catastrophic. That's what's driving people to vote.
When are we going to have nowhere to live? It's not going to be in the it's even though it will be like in the grand scheme of things near. It's not going to be genuinely near for people who are worried about money, right?
I fear though that from a perspective, if you're looking at the parties on the right wing, more specifically the Conservative Party, it's very easy to say you have other priorities and kind of avoid the idea of saying that you don't care about climate change as a priority. But there's a very real example last week where they had to fully cancel a planned climate change debate, a debate solely focused on climate change, because the Conservatives were unable or frankly unwilling to supply a single candidate from any riding nationally to appear at that debate, which I think is speaking so much volumes to how little that party has regard for the an issue that is so high on a lot of voters' minds. And I think it influences the way people vote, not necessarily pushing them all to rush toward the Green Party, but in a lot of ways subconsciously pushing that ABC, anything but conservative mindset, and making people vote strategically in the sense of what party will do at the end of the day more than the Conservatives would do if they were in power.
I just don't understand if climate change or the climate crisis is the main, is the one issue that you're voting on. Why wouldn't you vote Green?
Because it's about mediating the change that's happening. Like at the end of the day, a pipeline, for example, on one end, but banning single-use plastics by 2021 is more than the Conservatives can say that they have as a plan, because the only aspect of their plan that is really well known is getting rid of the carbon tax. So if anything,
don't meet the targets, aren't we doomed then? Isn't there no turning back once that happens?
They tell you that.
That's my question.
It's a non-binding agreement, right? It's
of course.
Good faith.
I'm pretty sure it's within a decade. It's not that because there's this misconception that the world's going to end. But I'm pretty sure
it's irreparable damage.
Yeah, that's what it is. Yeah.
So vote Green.
Well,
they've only picked up one extra seat.
It comes down to where you're voting as well. Again, exactly what Jake says. It comes down to the strategic plan. Especially if you're voting in an area where it's where I was voting, where it was cut dead between conservative and liberal. You have to vote. You have to vote for at least the plan, at least the party that has some kind of form of action, or else you're just handing it over to the Conservatives, and that's 100% what Jake said. He's on the money.
I'll throw in to kind of go back at that idea of, yes, the Liberals aren't doing enough. I don't really talk a lot about voting until it's at the point. But I live and I vote in a riding that is 70-75% conservative.
Yeah.
And as much as I believe that our environmental policies should be as far left as the Green Party is saying on this issue, and I fully support this idea that we are in a crisis and we are not doing nearly enough to be done to save that. I am realistic with the fact that there is no chance of a Green Party candidate winning or even nearing the top 3 within my riding. And fact that is going to guide my voting, to know that at the end of the day, a Liberal is the only non-conservative party member that has even a chance of winning in my riding, though I know it won't happen. And as a result of that, it's not a Conservative, and therefore that is the best that my vote can do in that instance to prevent the worst possible thing from happening, which is adding one more Conservative who will do very little for my riding. And specifically in my riding, the Conservative in question is Peter Kent, who is a former environment minister under Stephen Harper and has to date one of the single worst environmental records. Specifically him, he was almost just a green stamp to approve of corporations and say they were doing things under the guise of being environmentally friendly when they weren't. And that's something that, even if it's a small vote, that's something that I want to combat.
Exactly.
Well, in regards to Peter Kent being the environment minister, excuse me. I have worked with him closely. In regards to the Kyoto Accord, the one he denied, it was because they weren't going to meet their targets. But I do understand the problem with, in your position, living in a riding, we're in the same riding, that is going to be conservative, and hoping for more climate action is something that you, like many people, want. And moving forward on this issue of climate action, let's talk about the economy and the carbon tax, because the carbon tax is something the Liberals are proposing to combat climate change, whereas the Conservatives are saying that they're going to scrap the carbon tax. Now, Sam, you talked about how Canadians are living paycheck to paycheck. How would the carbon tax affect Canadians? Because according to the Liberals, you're going to pay that tax, but you're going to get that money back. So how does that work?
Well, their argument is that the carbon tax would make inelastic products like gasoline and home energy more expensive. And inelastic means that no matter how the price changes, there's no change in consumer behavior. So you would see a supposed increase in the amount of total costs an average household would have. But it was a little strange, but my understanding was he said it would be offset by increases in sorry.
No, keep going.
Sorry. It'd be offset by changes to
keep going.
Okay, sorry. There would be more social credit and social systems that would offset the increase in costs to things like gasoline and home heating.
And Jessica, what's your thoughts on the climate action?
Climate action or
the carbon tax? Sorry.
Well, I think it's some form of action. I mean, I do see the argument now. Okay, it's gonna. It does raise expenses, but it also encourages people to use less of a non-renewable resource, and also encourages government to pursue a path of using a non-renewable resource.
No, go ahead. It's okay. Keep going.
So much going on. But yeah, and I think even if it's not the carbon tax is the way to go, which I personally think it is a positive implementation, and it should have a place in our government. But I also feel as though and a more sustainable approach, and something that would be more long term and more inclusive of families that are living paycheck to paycheck, would be research and the implementation of of forms of renewable resources, and looking into more green technology to replace things like oil and just our massive carbon footprint.
Mm-hmm. So clearly, the carbon tax has been a big issue here, but even provincially, it's been something that the Ford government has been fighting against. It's been we've had an issue with it in Alberta with Kenny. Clearly it's a big issue. And Trudeau is using that to his advantage. He's talking about the situation with Ford and Kenny, right, Amara?
Yeah, well, it's just he mentioned provincial politics a lot. And I don't remember, I think it was the second debate, that was when Scheer told him that he could run for the Ontario Liberals, right?
Yeah.
I just thought that was funny.
Well, it's interesting because that's kind of a precedent being set by Justin Trudeau, that there's attacking provincial leaders. And I think that in a time when Canada is so honestly fragile, its confederation, I don't think it's a good idea. I think it lacked a little foresight for him to attack people that, even if he was in a minority government, he'd have some degree of cooperation would be required. Don't you think?
Yeah, I mean, of course. Do you think Canada's confederation is fragile right now? What do you mean by that?
I'll let you know based on the results of the election, but
maybe you have to have some idea.
Yeah, I think. I think there's a general sentiment. We can see in Quebec, especially. We can get to that later, but I think as you've seen the NDP and the Liberals bleeding seats, you've seen the Bloc Québécois. They've been gaining seats, and they're not necessarily a separatist party, but they're more autonomous.
Mm-hmm.
And you can see that growth in autonomy in Quebec, even with the relative status quo in the equalization payments. But I know there's it wasn't maybe explicitly what Jason Kenney was discussing, but within his party in Alberta, the Conservatives wanted to do a referendum on how the equalization payments were divvied up. Mm-hmm. And I think if that were to occur, especially in the case of a Liberal government, you'd see some disagreement or fracturing between the West Coast and Quebec and the Atlantic provinces.
Speaking of West Coast, it's 10 o'clock now here. But according to CBC, the polls have closed in BC and the Yukon, which is kind of surprising, to be honest.
I didn't know that they would have closed.
They closed at 7 there?
That's interesting. But I was actually just going to talk about that. It's just past 10 o'clock. Let's have a poll check-in with the most contentious province here, for us at least, Ontario. What's happening, guys? What are we seeing in Ontario?
So, looking at I'm just going to refresh this right now.
Now, for our viewers, while you're getting that ready, let's see who everybody voted for in this election. Amara, let's start with you.
I voted Green in this election.
Okay. Yes. Samuel?
I voted PPC.
PPC. Jessica?
I voted Liberal.
Liberal. Okay. Christina?
I voted NDP.
Okay. And Jake?
For the sake of my riding, I voted Liberal.
Liberal. Okay. And Moralia?
I voted PPC.
Oh, we got Christina?
Yeah?
I saw your reaction go from bad to worse. What happened there?
No.
No? Well,
I mean, maybe we can get back to that when we see how well they do tonight.
Yeah,
find out what that says. But I think in terms of what Ontario is looking like right now, for the most part, fairly in line with how it usually plays out. The Conservatives really dominate the GTA and greater areas, while the Liberals have a stronger hold on the downtown core of Toronto, with a couple NDP leading areas way up in the north. But things are constantly changing. It's pretty close, and nothing has been called as of yet. But what's interesting, I don't know if I'll see this again, so I'm going to say this super quickly, is that there's a Green leading right now in Dufferin Caledon.
Yeah.
What?
Which
wow.
is
that's
your
my
riding,
district.
Right? Oh, okay, yeah. Which is it's still very early. They're only like 1 or 2 out of like 200 something polls, but take a picture because this does not happen often.
Hamilton.
They were always conservative, like conservative, and then I moved to Oakville like the last.
It's super early, but it's still
dead center.
It shows,
still a shock.
You think it can happen?
Yeah, the Hamilton area, like Oakville, Burlington. Hamilton is primarily Liberal, with the Hamilton Mountain being NDP right now.
Okay, so let's talk about some key ridings in Ontario. They would be in the GTA, the 905. Let's start with York Centre. So York Centre is is right at the border of Steele, so just below the 905. It is a contentious riding because it has been Liberal for ever, basically, until 2011 when Mark Adler won. And then it went back Conservative when Mark Adler won, and then it went back to Liberal when Michael Levitt won in 2015. Now there's a strong contender, Rachel Wilson. So I hear some... what's up? Go ahead.
Rachel Wilson is a character.
Why is that? Tell us.
If you take a look, I follow. It's near mine, and I know people within that riding, so I definitely follow that area quite a bit, and I've followed also Michael Levitt and his track record on certain issues in that community. And I think what Rachel Levitt embodies, which is
Rachel Levitt.
Rachel Wilson.
Or
Rachel Wilson.
Okay.
Rachel Wilson embodies, which is obviously. For someone, for example, who might be more socially left-wing as opposed to right-wing, is that she's a very social conservative on top of her economically conservative values. And a lot of candidates that embody those kinds of values and their, I would say, almost resurgence within the party ranks in terms of being candidates is something that a lot of people attribute to the fact that Andrew Scheer on his own holds particularly socially conservative beliefs. And that's been a point of contention as to if he were elected, whether his government and his Conservative Party would do anything to act on or support some of those beliefs, or whether he would stand with what previous governments have done. And
I think he supports abortion, and he supports gay and transgender rights.
There's proof that him personally
in the
has
past
not supported, although
yeah.
the status quo seems to be that he won't make issue of those as issues.
He won't question it
as a leader, exactly. Yeah. But it stands to reason that, as you were saying before, when you're voting for a candidate and you're voting for a party leader, you're looking at the values that they hold and they represent, and that is a huge thing that's on people's mind, regardless if they plan on voting conservative or not. It's something that people look at instantly when they were to look at Andrew Scheer, that, in all honesty, in the conservative race, may not have stuck out as much when you were looking at Maxime Bernier as the other candidate.
Mm-hmm. And so what's the data looking like for York Centre right now? Can we pull that up?
It's Liberal right now.
Liberal right now?
Still fairly early. Not a whole lot has been counted, but right now it is doing substantially more Liberal.
It's led by about 40 votes, so we don't know yet.
Out of 2 polls.
Yeah.
Oh, wow. Only 2 polls. Okay. Well, it is still early, right? I mean,
something that could flip flop.
Exactly, and it's gonna flip flop, I'm sure, because it is a contentious riding. Another one is Milton, which is the deputy Conservative Party leader Lisa Raitt versus one of the Liberal Party's new star candidates, Adam Van Koeverden. And for those who find that name a little familiar, he's actually a former Olympian and a medalist, a former Olympian who won medals at the, what was it? Which Olympics was it?
The summer.
The Summer Olympics, right. And the Liberals clearly knew that was going to be a tough riding to get, so they put a star candidate there. And last time I checked the polls, it was 55-45 in Lisa Raitt's favor. But he's definitely giving her a run for her money, and it's kind of a problem because you look at the previous election and Eglinton Lawrence, you had the finance minister lose his seat, which is big. And Eglinton Lawrence is another key riding, but we're going to talk about that in a sec. But the fact that major conservative seats seem to be being lost is a problem, right? What do you think of the Liberals running Adam Van Koeverden there, Jake?
I mean, I feel like in this particular election cycle, I feel like everyone is going to bring such a different vibe depending which cycle we're discussing. And in the 2015 cycle, it was very clear that the idea was to challenge the status quo that had been 10 years of a Harper government, which is why I understand the move of putting up your best hitters, so to speak, in areas or in regions where big party names were running to unseat them. But in an election like this, where the Liberals are for the most part, incumbents, and they're choosing one of their quote-unquote star candidates to run against a fairly well liked and high up conservative candidate, it kind of seems like an odd choice to me. I mean, I understand if that's the riding you grew up in, that's what you're going to run in. But if that's something that they tried to do strategically, it seems like an odd choice in the sense that I would probably go to reinforce some of the ridings that you think you do have a better shot at winning in, rather than try to challenge your competition when you're the one in power.
And just a side note, CBC projects a Liberal government.
Yeah.
That just
really
came through.
a minority Liberal government.
Yeah, it doesn't indicate which if it's going to be minority or majority. It just says that CBC News projects Liberal government.
That's quite a shock. I wasn't expecting. I mean, I was partly expecting that. I was partly expecting that, partly either conservative minority or liberal minority. But I just wanted to pull up on the screen. We have Milton. The polls or the results coming in. So Adam Van Koeverden is leading with 44.9%. That's about 109 votes. And Lisa Raitt, 8 votes behind at 41.6%. Are we looking like we're going to unseat Lisa Raitt, or is she going to pull through?
Oh, just updated.
I would see her pulling through.
Just updated? 6% now.
Yeah.
Above. Sorry, what did you say, Jake?
Personally, in this, I mean, anything can happen, obviously, but I think, again, with the dynamics of her place in the party and I guess the optics overall, I could see her pulling through for the win. But you never know. Mm-hmm. I think that, kind of going off of your earlier point about if you were might be surprised to see a Liberal government, I think that the bigger surprise here would be if either leading party were to win a majority. I think that everyone is pretty much understanding of the mindset that whatever happens, there will be a minority government of sorts. And I would be surprised if anything. I think the polling averages for any majority government were under 10% by earlier today, which is not surprising. But in terms of which one of those takes control, I think that, again, a Liberal, just because they are the incumbents, I think they have that slight advantage of having more MPs who are holding on to their seats rather than trying to kick someone out.
It's almost like a tennis match. If you enter a tennis match thinking that I haven't played for months and that I might not win this, you're definitely going to lose. But if you are already in the winning mindset and you've already won before, you'll definitely win again.
You think so? What do you think?
I mean, it's a little bit different when it comes to politics.
Definitely.
I think. It all depends on who comes out to vote as well, and we're having a huge new generation of young voters, and
millennials are the biggest voting
they are.
bloc, right?
They're bigger than
baby boomers.
Yeah, they're so much bigger than baby boomers now. And as Mara did say previously, millennials do tend to vote more liberal. That's not necessarily always the case, but that does tend to be what happens. So we are. I mean, I think it is more likely to not just we have the mentality of because we were conservative before, we're going to be conservative still. I mean, that does happen obviously a lot, but that also, I don't know, I think we're going to see a lot of change in this election, and you've seen it already recently where you're not only is it between Liberal and Conservative, but it's been a lot between Liberal and NDP, which I don't think has really been that big of a pull in the past.
And so in regards to Christina's comment about a Liberal minority, we have a comment from Hendrik Kaiser. He says, has anyone ever been happy with their PM? All I ever used to hear is how much Harper sucks, and he was in power for a decade. So with Justin Trudeau coming back, people are, still unhappy. There are people that are always unhappy with Trudeau. There are people going to be unhappy with. Yeah.
People are always unhappy with, nothing's ever going to be perfect. And I think it was said before that people want change when they vote. And I think that's 100% true. And it doesn't really matter who was in office. I mean, it does matter. I won't say it doesn't matter. It does matter. But I think people are always going to be unhappy and complaining.
And I think one thing that we tend to forget is we see the face of a party and forget that there's a lot more behind it. So maybe we all dislike Trudeau, but we also he's not the one calling all the shots. There's a whole party standing behind him, and I think that can become very influential in people's votes. Sorry, I'm jumbling my words. But I think generally we judge these parties based off of the faces, and I think people are sick of Trudeau, but we forget that there's a whole party standing behind him. So I think you can. You're always going to be unhappy with your leader. You're not going to not be able to find flaws in every leader.
And if you're happy, you're usually quiet.
Yeah, and
not a lot of people that are actually happy with their leaders will be like, "Oh, I'm so happy with my leader."
Exactly. And I think quiet. I think for myself, because this election, I was very torn. I even messaged Elliot earlier. I hadn't even voted yet, and I wasn't even 100% set on what I was going to choose. And I think a lot of that is based off of who you see. And I don't know. I wish you could pick and choose, because there's things that I like from every single party, and things that I hate from every single party. So yeah, it's hard. I don't think you can ever be fully satisfied with your leader.
I think you bring up a great point about that as well. Just how there has been such an indecision, I think, as I just said, in this election, where it's just been, I think for a lot of people that tend to be more left, they're really indecisive between, I mean, unless you're fully for one party.
Strategic voting.
Yeah, and it comes down to which left party are you going to go for? And strategic voting, which is such an issue in itself. Exactly.
Needs to be reformed.
Well, when you say strategic voting is an issue in itself, what do you mean by that?
I think because, I mean, I strategically voted, so I'm not saying don't strategically vote. You strategically voted. I mean, it comes down to for me personally, you're not voting for the party that you necessarily want to vote for. And that was a big part of Singh's platform as well. Like, don't vote for who you want, and vote for who's going to make the change for you, and not just do the strategic thing. And he really tried to fight for that, which is like 100% I agree with. I mean, if I was in a less of a a deadlock between liberals and conservatives, I would have felt like my vote would have been more influential in an NDP setting kind of thing. But when you have that place where you're like, hey, you really don't want the conservatives in, or you don't want another party in, and you feel that you just have to go with the party it has a lot of your beliefs, but you still have issues with, but you're doing that for the sake of, it's the lesser of two evils. I think that kind of takes away from your true values, and it takes away from who you really want. And that was my position. I personally, like, my NDP really encompasses a lot of what I believe in, and what I would personally want to vote for, but it comes down to not being feasible.
You vote for who you vote against who you don't want to
exactly.
win. It's not you vote for who you want to win. Which it's not even entirely democratic, in my opinion.
It's not. It really isn't. And that's why we need that reform, because it 100% isn't democratic if you're not really using your voice to the fullest, but you're doing it to get somebody else out.
Or you're not voting the way you want to.
Exactly.
And that's one thing that like this election, because when I first voted, that was my mentality, is I'm going to vote for who I want to, because either way it's a message. And then for the provincial election, I decided to do strategic voting. And then this election, again, I returned to the idea of I'm going to vote for who I want to vote for. And I think I can definitely say that Jugmeat kind of like not pointed me in that direction, but I think that I felt more confident in the idea of I should vote for who I want to, because at the end of the day, your vote still means something. It still reforms. It's still, like, things change based on a single vote. So just because the person you vote for, the party you vote for, doesn't go into power, doesn't mean that a message isn't being sent, right? So if I just decided and this is like when I was messaging you earlier, and I was like, it was down to the two who I was going to choose. I decided that I was just going to vote for who I wanted to, because it was my right to. So
in terms of strategic voting, let's talk about some more key ridings, and they would be Liana Alislav in Richmond, Aurora Oak Ridge's Richmond Hill, as well as Markham Stouffville. So those are some key ridings, because you have Liana Alislav, who was a Liberal and she crossed the floor to a Conservative. And do we have the results, Jessica, coming out of Aurora Oak Ridge's Richmond Hill?
I have it, actually.
You have it?
Again, still too early, but Leona's leading with 48. But Leah Taylor-Roy,
88 here.
Oh, there we go.
Percent?
No, 88 votes.
Oh, sorry. I'm at
No
600
worries.
votes, so maybe.
Oh, yeah, it is
586.
48%. Yeah.
Yeah.
So she's not a runaway just yet. She still has a Liberal kind of trailing after her. But speaking to what you were speaking about with the Markham Stouffville riding, which is obviously Jane Philpott's riding, I think that's a major aspect that kind of ties into what we were discussing about strategic voting, with the idea of, regardless of whether you're going to vote for her because she has obviously the name that you recognize and you remember her as a candidate that did well, she's also a vote that will take away from the Liberal candidate who obviously is going to sit in a caucus and add to Justin Trudeau's numbers over Andrew Scheer's, because right now you're looking at it, and although it is still close, that riding is currently in the lead of a Conservative. Which
are you talking about Markham Stouffville?
Still on Markham Stouffville.
Okay.
Yeah. Which at the end of the day, the combined percentages of the Liberal and Jane Philpott, who's running as an independent in that riding, could easily have beaten that Conservative from where it stands right now. But the act of obviously her running as an independent has a lot of baggage to come with it via the whole SNC-Lavalin scandal, and I fully support that and her running as an independent. But being a voter, for example, if you were a voter in that riding, strategic voting would play a major part in, the idea of whether or not you would vote strategically to see if you would vote to put Jane in, or
23% of the votes.
Exactly,
Yeah.
but if she were running under a Liberal banner and
She would
not
have
have
gotten
an
it.
independent
She'd
competitor,
have 60%.
she'd be in.
So right now we're looking at it on screen. Theodore Anthony is at 34.9%. He is the conservative candidate. He is in the lead by just over 1% against Helena Jasek, who is the Liberal. Jane Philpott is in third place. But the fact that an independent, like you were saying, has so much support, 23%, is incredible. Unfortunately, because she's an independent, it doesn't look like she's going to win her seat back. It looks like right now it's going to Theodore Anthony of the Conservatives, which is a lost seat for the Liberals.
At the end of the day, I really hope she does pull through and somehow win this seat. But I think that the statement that, well, obviously this will be a big story in the coming weeks because of her high profile. And I think the fact that if this seat does get lost to the Conservatives, that in itself will be a major story that will impact Trudeau especially. But even now, as I'm just saying that, the page refreshed and the Liberals are on top by 0.2%. So it's still way too early to tell.
And it's quite interesting because you look at Liana Alislav, and she was able to change parties and still get her riding support. So a lot of the time, not only does it depend on the party, but it depends on the candidate, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So let's move forward to everything good in there.
Oh yeah, no, we were just looking at some of the comments.
Oh.
Nothing bad. We were just looking at them.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Well, thank you, Christoph. Elliot Fire 100. Thank you. I really appreciate that. I read that as if I'm 80 years old, but it's fine. But I really appreciate it, Christoph. If you're still watching, thank you for that. Now let's talk about another key riding, which is let's talk King Vaughan. King Vaughan was held currently by Deb Schult, who used to be a city of council member for the city of Vaughan, and now she is in a tough spot with Anna Roberts, the Conservative MP. As we know, in the provincial election, it was the first time that riding was used, and it went Conservative to the Ontario Education Minister, Stephen Lecce. And now the Conservatives are hoping to use that momentum and turn that federal riding blue. Do we have the results coming up for... yeah, we do. Let me put them up on screen. So Deb Schult is in the lead with just under 50% of the support. We have Anna Roberts at 38.6%, so just over 11% difference there. And it's definitely one of the races to watch because Anna Roberts has had a lot of support, high-profile support. Scheer was in her riding several times, I haven't seen Trudeau there, but it's definitely one to watch. And right now it's early, but it's going to be a nail-biter for that one.
Can I ask you to pull up one other poll?
Yeah, which one?
Etobicoke North.
I was just going to say that one's
the only one that has been so far called and confirmed
in Toronto.
In Ontario
for
the Liberals. It's not a surprise. Christy Duncan, the Minister of Science, is defending her seat in there. But one thing I did want to point out, which is why this riding is interesting to me, is that currently trailing in 5th place with 2% of the vote and less than 100 votes is Renata Ford, obviously the late wife of Doug Ford, running on behalf of the People's Party.
Yeah.
And I remember that was a big deal when it was announced because obviously Ford was aligned with the Conservatives, and his brother is the Premier of Ontario under the Progressive Conservative banner. So this was kind of seen as a slap in the face to that party. But
it's quite a shock. I was just kind of looking through all the different candidates and ridings, and it was a shock. I didn't even know that she was running for the PPC. And honestly, what was she thinking? She was like, I'm sorry, but she's not going to win that riding.
It's part of the Ford family we're talking about. Not much thinking goes on.
Well,
I just was going to say, Don Valley East has also Yasmin Ratanzi was
and
elected.
Muskoka
And Muskoka as well, which is Conservative.
So Don Valley East was called what?
Liberal.
Liberal. Okay, so Don Valley East.
An incumbent keeping a seat.
That's my writing.
Stormont Dundas South Glengarry is Conservative, and Haldimand Norfolk is also Conservative.
Okay, so let me just pull up the map that we're looking at on... you want to just zoom in there, Jessica?
Where?
Just into Ontario, the southern area. Southern area right there.
Where's... I don't have my color glasses on, sorry. There you
go. There we go. So you're looking at... generally, the exterior ridings are blue, and just go forward to downtown Toronto. You don't have to just move them. There we go. Yeah, you can see that Toronto is very red as usual. What are we seeing for Don Valley West? What are the results coming out for Don Valley West?
Don Valley West, Liberals are still leading. Rob Oliphant, who's the incumbent, currently has 56% of the vote. But again, only 3 out of 170 polls are in, so anything can still happen. Yvonne Robertson trailing with about 30% of the vote, but nothing is unrulable just yet.
Sarnia is confirmed conservative.
That's Marilyn Gladu?
Yeah, I believe so. Let me click. Yeah. And then there's now a note here that CBC News projects Liberal minority government.
Again, so that's twice they've projected it.
Well,
At first they just
liberal.
projected Liberal. Now they're saying minority.
Wow.
Yeah.
Which is interesting to see that right off the bat they could call a Liberal victory so assuredly, which means that there was less of a question of whether the government would be liberal or conservative versus whether the Liberals would actually have enough to keep their majority or lose it, which is surprising.
I think it's also I don't think I've talked to anybody who, well, I mean, I have, but I think the majority of the people I've talked to were expecting that, like, a Liberal minority. I mean, can't confirm, but that's what the projections are, and I think people were kind of assuming that's what would be happening.
Yeah.
Let's move on to another key riding, which is the riding of Eglinton Lawrence. That used to be the riding of the former finance minister Joe Oliver. Now it is held by Marco Mendicino of the Liberal Party. Generally, there hasn't been any issue with him. The riding, he hasn't had any problems, any scandals. He's just been working away. The riding seems to like him, but he's having some problems from the Conservative candidate Khani Raben. Now, what's interesting about that riding is it has a very big religious Orthodox Jewish population. And for those who don't know, today is Simchat Torah, which is a Jewish holiday. So Orthodox Jews cannot vote today, which was a problem that Khani was part of the team fighting to change the election date, and the court, Elections Canada, ruled, or the court ruled in their favor, but Elections Canada declined to change the date. So the key was getting the Orthodox Jewish people to vote, and we'll see how that turns out. What are we seeing in Eglinton Lawrence? Jake, you and I being Jewish, what do you think about this? The election being held on a Jewish holiday like this.
I mean, I'm obviously not as religious as
right,
Khani is, so I can't really speak from her perspective on that front. Personally, I feel that if your supporter base will support you enough in the fight to make a decision, then it's to change the election date, then it sounds like they've made a decision in advance enough to just go to an advance poll without making an issue of that. But obviously I'm speaking from someone who, although Jewish, is not coming from a religious standpoint, who holds the sanctity of that holiday and not working or doing anything resembling work on that holiday dear. So I understand the reasoning behind that, but I also don't believe it to have as much weight on the decision of the riding as of yet. Based on the numbers we're seeing right now, Marco Mendicino is not only an incumbent, but is currently leading with 60% compared to Raben's 25%. So it doesn't seem like the lack of a more substantial Orthodox turnout would have been able to change the tides just yet.
Yeah, so some very... I mean, these ridings were considered key ridings according to CBC and according to City TV and CTV News. So that's why we're talking about them. But clearly they're swinging a certain way, a very, very one way to the Liberals.
For the most part, I feel like it's just they're sticking with the status quo. I wouldn't say so much that it's because they believe in the Liberals, but it's just because they are not necessarily willing to change just yet. I don't think we've seen any one of those listed ridings as ones to watch that has deviated from any of its incumbent MPs just yet. So it's still curious to take a look at. Another thing, I mean, obviously, if you take a bigger look at the map, you're going to see a lot more blue in ridings that are not necessarily reflecting the demographics of how many people are actually represented in those ridings. But one thing that is worthy of noting right now is that the entire map of both Alberta and Saskatchewan is either leading or confirmed conservative. And they've also started to seep in a little bit into British Columbia, which I believe
Let's take a look at that on the screen. Jessica's pulling that up for us. Yeah. So you can see that you're right. Saskatchewan and Alberta are basically going conservative. They're normally conservative, right? They're pretty conservative. But you look at Alberta, though, and it had a provincial NDP government for the longest time. So now that they've gone conservative, looks like they're going to go conservative federally as well.
I wouldn't say it's a big shock to see this, but I do think that it kind of reinforces the idea that obviously there's a great divide between what I always compare it to American politics in a way where you can look at an American map and automatically kind of cut out certain areas of the
Especially
map,
cities and
know what state is going to vote what in a certain area, and then once you remove that, you kind of see the ridings or the areas that you're actually left with that can really sway things. So, for example, seeing this is something more common, still worth noting, but not necessarily surprising.
It's definitely so. Again, we're looking at a liberal minority government now. What are some safe ridings? Let's talk about safe riding. So, Jake, for you and I, we both live in Thornhill. Peter Kent, I would say that's one of the safest conservative seats there is. What do you think?
Yeah, I'm actually surprised they haven't called it yet. It's still just listed as leading, which is interesting. Although they have not a substantial number of polls, I've seen groups that have got called for a lot less. But this is really a two-horse race. I know in a lot of ridings, there's a third party, be it the Green Party or the New Democrats, or in a lot of cases the Bloc Québécois, who make it to that top three where you have even a chance of breaking the mold. But with here, any other party that isn't liberal conservative is trailing with less than a collective 10% of the vote. So it really is a two-horse race between Peter Kent, the conservative, and Gary Gladstone, who is a liberal. Gary Gladstone broke from, I guess, traditional precedent by not giving out any election signs this year. He made a point to only put up a smaller number of general signs in key places, but wouldn't give out any lawn signs to people who would have otherwise requested them, which is interesting, trying to put more of that effort on going paperless. And I'm not sure, regardless, whether that would have made a big difference. I don't see, even with my vote or whoever else was kind of swayed by that, this riding changing. Yeah. But it is still worth highlighting the fact that, little things like that are things that we can easily adopt as norms and make huge differences in footsteps that we don't have to view as a game changer or just a publicity move if people just start adopting these practices.
Yeah, it's such a good initiative. It just shows that maybe that's what's going to happen in the future. People are going to put their lawn signs maybe on their social media instead of on their lawn, for example.
Yeah, I was just going to say, and I guess it depends on the age demographic, but I'm sure the older population might be more persuaded by that, the lawn signs and the posters and whatever. Whereas I think younger people are definitely keeping up with elections and parties online. And I think that's still a great message to just, say, hey, I'm not going to be wasteful this election. And even if it's not successful, it's still the message in itself, I think, is effective. And I think that I hate seeing all those lawn signs everywhere. My family personally always refuses to do it because they don't
want to disclose who they're voting for to the public.
Well, I think my dad is very he'll never share. We always know because we know him. We know what he votes, but his whole thing is that he doesn't share. But my mom and my sister are open about who they vote for. If anybody asked, they'd tell. I just think that they don't like the idea of decorating your home with this political party and, I don't know. I personally hate seeing them all over the place. I don't find them effective either. I never see those signs and go, I'm going to look into that candidate. Maybe I'll vote for them. It has no persuasion over me.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Yeah. And I think social media with young people is a way bigger deal than lawn signs.
But even going back, though, when social media wasn't a thing and it's just our baby boomers voting and all that kind of stuff, were they really ever that effective? Like, that's...
I don't know if it's effective. Like, somebody's going to see the lawn sign and say, like, I'm going to look into that. But maybe if you live in a neighborhood and there's a bunch of liberal lawn signs, like, that might discourage conservative voters. It might encourage people to vote strategically. Like, I think that's probably what they're going for more than trying to persuade people.
Yeah. But then, like, honestly, I think that even if, okay, let's say, like, there's a really conservative riding, I'm just going to throw out thousands upon thousands of signs. Obviously, that's an exaggeration, and which will like look more than the liberal signs. It comes like if you're voting based on that, that's not an educated vote at all.
Well, a lot of people don't vote.
Which is like, just look into it. Research it. Figure out what's going on.
I mean, you could argue that Trudeau won initially because of his last name and because of his dad, not because of him.
I think it's.
He got the opportunity.
I think it would be hard if he weren't the nominee that was chosen to lead the Liberal Party. I think it would have been a hard case to sell that any Liberal leader who had any amount of charisma would have been able to unseat Stephen Harper with both the surge in support for the anything but conservative movement, as well as the just poor showing from the NDP that year.
Yeah, you're right. Just look at the former leaders: Michael Ignatieff, Stéphane Dion, who's an abomination to the Dion name. Sorry,
Celine is so much better.
She really is.
She's so talented. My friend is seeing her November 21st, and she's so excited.
I'm seeing her December 10th in Toronto, so it's gonna be good. Your friend and I should link up. Jake Wan is actually a big fan of Celine Dion as well, so we're going to the same concert. But
I've never other than you met a genuine Celine Dion fan.
Well, we exist.
I'm a Celine Dion fan. She's so talented.
She's talented. Why are we talking about Celine right now?
Because
to bring us back in.
She's the most Canadian pop star around.
CBC has just called for certain the first leader to win back his seat,
which is
Yves-François Blanchet has won his seat in Quebec.
I'm not really shocked.
Again, not surprising. But looking at Justin Trudeau's riding, he's currently polling at about 50%, still very early on, but most likely also going to be holding on to
also,
that.
Can I address one of the comments quickly?
Yes, I wanted to talk about that too.
Oh, okay. So, Christophe,
yes, yeah.
He says, quick question to you all. On a scale of 1 to 10, how confident or comfortable do you feel about our next 4-year period with our PM? Just curious.
Well, just in terms of if it's a minority government, it's going to be less than 4 years. That's for sure. Most likely it's going to be less than 4 years, right?
Well,
Yeah.
I mean, nothing's saying that it has to be, but just history has proven that they tend to last a little bit less
it's 18
time.
months or something that they're predicting another election. If it's
18 months?
18 months.
Between 18 to 24, where they might call.
Wow.
Yeah. So within that time frame, if it's a liberal minority government, I'm pretty sure they're going to, like you were saying, it'll be historically speaking. They'll call for a new election.
Mm-hmm. What do you think? What's your answer to that question?
My confidence is somewhere in the middle because I don't love Trudeau, and I think he's disappointed me already in the past 4 years. I think there's things that I never expected from him, and the whole message that he portrayed, like the whole pipeline thing, the Trans Mountain Pipeline, that alone was a big thing for me, where it's like these people aren't even thinking about you, but you feel like betrayed by them. I just felt like there were just a lot of letdowns. So based off of the last 4 years, I was disappointed, but I want to say I'm somewhere in the middle because I still have confidence and I believe in like the Liberal Party. It's just hard.
Agenda, yeah.
Yeah, it's just hard to say.
I think just going off of that, like I agree, there's been a lot of disappointment. And he did face not enough backlash, to be honest, but he did face some. So I think because of that, there'll be some more motivation to pursue the bigger areas where he did drop the ball. Which leaves me in a little bit more hope. Definitely, I mean, I wasn't eligible to vote 4 years ago, but going into that, like compared to the Harper government, I was honestly genuinely excited to see like, okay, this is great. We're gonna actually make some progressive and not regressive change. today's standpoint, I'm not worried from the standpoint of like, okay, I have to worry about for myself as a woman, and abortion rights and stuff like that. With the potential of having this liberal government, but from the standpoint of the environment, hopefully a lot more is done, which is a little iffy. So I don't know. I guess I'd have to say, yeah, kind of mutual. I mean, I don't want to be too negative. Not as happy as I was 4 years ago, especially if I was able to vote 4 years ago. But
most people, I feel like, are not as happy with Trudeau, but they just feel that he would be the best option. I think the bigger concern here is what Scheer was talking about, which is the Liberal NDP coalition.
Mm-hmm.
Sam
Scheer just called to win his seat.
Yeah.
Oh,
Continue.
Well,
CBC
congratulations to
News
Scheer.
And Blanchet as well has won his seat.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There was just like a thing from CBC News that projects that Scheer is
there
going to
we go.
win his seat.
Sorry to interrupt.
No, that's okay. But
Should have made like breaking news noises.
if I had the little air horn, I would have given it to you. But let's talk about that minority or that coalition that she was talking about, because he was really using that to instill fear into people and say, if you don't vote Conservative, you're going to get another 4 years of the Liberals and the NDP. Now,
Sheeran himself scares me. So like anything,
he's not a scary in person. I can tell you from personal
yeah,
experience.
Yeah, but
he's
that's
just
what you see.
And this is
No,
what
I've
I
actually
don't think we're talking about him as
know, but-
character. I think she's
no, I just no.
He reminds
not,
me
not,
of it. He has the
his-
same weird eyes.
His character, he looks like a toddler trapped in a man's body, and he's like slimy and just he really weirds me out. Really weirds me out. Not a fan. Besides physical appearance and character, I also he's the Conservative Party in general scares me, and I think it scares me this election more than it has in the past. When you look at who Scheer actually is as a person, his beliefs and the things that he's voted on and things that he said, and I mean, we can say the same thing about Trudeau and blackface and all of that, but I think the idea of somebody running or being the face of a country, having done and said some of the things he has, that scares me. So the things that he's saying, like a coalition government, using that to instill fear in people, that's the least scary thing that he said or could say.
Yeah, so you're not a fan.
No.
But let's look at Sam and Moralia. You guys voted for the PPC.
Mm-hmm.
So clearly Trudeau, I guess, wasn't far right enough for you guys. Would you say that?
No, well, Scheer wasn't. I don't see Scheer as a conservative.
What do you see him as?
He's a center left at best.
Really?
Wow.
No way in hell.
Well,
Center left.
yeah.
Oh my God.
Well,
Let him.
I'm
so many
I'm
things
curious
with
to hear
one
what
at a time.
let's hear. Let Sam.
One at a time. Let's go,
discuss
He
Sam.
aligns
why
with so many issues with Trudeau, which is you'd expect it to be drastically different, but they're almost the same. It's like the same coin, but two different faces.
I kind of argue the idea that we have to just automatically expect someone on a different perspective of a wing to have an opposing view
I agree with
as
that.
someone in a wing. And I think that really speaks to not just Canada, but the polarization of Western politics in general,
Yeah.
where it's no longer become enough to support a certain side. You now have to go against the ideas of another side for not being extreme enough,
No,
which is where I
totally.
find a big issue with the basis of something like the People's Party. But I'm very curious about the center-left idea of what aspects.
I just think just one other thing is Scheer differs so well. Obviously, I agree with that. I think parties are closer in terms of their beliefs than we might realize, and I think that's also influenced by American politics and what we see in social media and the idea of Trump and Hillary being like complete polar opposites.
I think the PPC has been smeared because they hold so many libertarian views, but no one ever talks about libertarian views, and they don't talk about the small pockets of libertarians across Canada, because people assume generally because he wants to reduce immigration that he's definitely far right. I don't think he's far right. I think he's massively libertarian. And people assume so many things about Blanchet. People assume so many things about a party when they haven't researched the platform, because media is educating you instead of you doing your research.
Can we go back to Samuel for a second?
Sure. So I would I vote based on how I would see a prospective candidate actually governing, and Scheer has expressed his own political beliefs, his personal beliefs, not ones that he would ever enact in any kind of policy. So it's complete. It doesn't matter. Like, sorry, bud, your personal beliefs. If you're not going to put that forward in policy, then don't be a politician. You're just going to say what's popular. He probably said it when he was. That's the thing. Like, he's so disingenuous. If you said those things in the past, couldn't you just say that he was saying those things because he thought it was politically advantageous? So he's not supporting that now as a policy because it's politically advantageous. So the point I'm
because
trying to
he holds more conservative beliefs, but he doesn't necessarily say that he's going to for sure act on those. I guess obviously more speaking to the socially conservatives. That's why you consider him center left.
Yes. Well, he doesn't hold any socially political positions that are any different from mainstream Canada.
Yeah.
That he would enforce in policy or put forward as a bill. And for that reason, I think he is center left at best. And I myself, I would describe myself as left-wing economically and then right-wing socially, or socially conservative. And I think there's definitely a minority within Canada where that specific political sliver is not represented at all. And Bernier he's a libertarian, which is a very right-wing form.
Almost the reverse of that, though, wouldn't you say?
It is. Well,
Yeah.
I only like certain parts of Bernier's platform. He was better than everything else, but yeah, there's no really political party that I can identify with, which is very, very difficult come election time.
But how do we were all in the idea that the idea of polarizing, if you have to be so far to one side that you have to oppose the other. I feel like that's diametrically, like, that's totally in opposite of kind of what you're saying about how Bernier can appear to both a libertarian base and a base that's socially conservative but economically liberal. I feel like just the intersection of those two are at such completely different ends of, forget a political spectrum, a full like four, I don't know what you call that, a graph.
Small party. Sometimes it grasps the people that are just on the outside. You know, that's a thing about a libertarian party. It grabs a few independents, right? People you wouldn't think would vote for that person.
But if he were to come into power and enact any piece of legislation, he'd be automatically alienating a good majority of his base as a means of having that. So what's the value of running where you're appealing to everybody, but then at this, how do you know where he stands?
I have the same question, yeah.
I don't
where
understand
Bernie
the question.
stands?
The idea I'm getting the feeling of is that right now I'm hearing two different perspectives of where you are on in terms of supporting Bernier.
Sure.
One is left socially and can
Other way around.
Yeah.
No, so
both. I'm saying they're both different ends. And I'm saying that if you are saying that the issue that you have with mainstream parties like conservatives for not acting enough on socially conservative values, but then you have supporters of Bernier who admit to having socially liberal values, how do you go about supporting someone not knowing where they're going to stand because their base is so
economically
divided?
Matters more to me than socially. Just think about how the Liberals have been spending their budget. It's been totally extreme. And if we were going through a recession right now, all of us would be having a rough time.
I see the idea of where you wouldn't vote Liberal, but I'm curious to where that distinction of the People's Party over the Conservative Party comes from.
So the Conservatives, in terms of everything, in terms of their budget plan and in terms of socially, is the exact same, except with the minor few tweaks as the Liberals.
Yeah, that's the problem, which is why I'm not enthusiastic, or I wasn't enthusiastic about voting Conservative, and I did not end up voting Conservative.
Yeah.
It's not even just Bernier's supporters that are left-wing socially. He has himself said that he takes a laissez-faire approach to social issues. He says he's an individualist first and foremost, and that means that he wouldn't enact any policy that limits personal freedom.
The Conservatives have unseated Bernier, I just wanted to say.
Wow.
What?
Yes, the Conservative has defeated the People's Party by 2,130 votes in Beauce.
So Bernier just lost his seat.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Trudeau
Did
has
anybody-
managed to hold on to his. On that note.
So you're thrilled about that, obviously, Jessica.
Of course I am.
Yeah. Sam?
Yeah, I mean, if you want to see more uniparty, then sure, yeah.
Do you
I'd
think
be happy.
that Bernier running for or creating this whole People's Party really shot the Conservatives in the foot? You think they could have gotten a majority? Amara, you're shaking your head no?
No.
No, I don't think he made enough of an impact to really.
No,
help
I
them.
think you're seeing more so that the Bloc is what has shot the Conservatives and more so the NDP in Quebec. I mean, those are obviously we're starting east from west. We'll see more in the prairies in New Brunswick. But yeah, I think the Conservatives, the biggest enemy tonight was probably the Bloc.
Yeah,
Well-
it's taken 14% of the votes in Beauce.
Well, I want to move on to a little bit of a happier note before we get back into the elections with about 10 minutes left in our show. We might go a bit over just because this is so exciting, but we'll see about that. I want to, it's 10:51, and that means it's time to hand out our special prize for this evening. Thanks to the generosity of Elvira Carrier, the winner will be receiving a $50 gift card to Amazon. It's a big prize. Now, Carrier's
Save the rainforest.
fair
Nice.
point. But Carrier's Corner is a live, on-location social media broadcast hosted by award-winning broadcaster Elvira Carrier. For more information, please visit elviracarrier.com. And might I add, I work with Elvira Carrier a lot, and she is one of the most sought-after MCs and voice-over artists, or voice artists in Canada. Thank you, Elvira, for helping to support the Raben Report. And now, the winner is Hendrik Kaiser. Hendrik Kaiser. Does anybody know who Hendrik Kaiser is? Is he friends with anybody here?
I don't know
Yeah.
who he is.
Yeah,
He
who?
is.
He is? You know him?
Yes.
Who is he?
He is my boyfriend.
Oh, well, congratulations, because
Shopping spree.
honestly,
Amazon.
thank you to him.
Yeah.
And it's nice that you didn't tell us who that was to begin with.
I'm
because-
really mad
I
that
kind
Theodore didn't step his game up.
Listen, you won. Theodore won last
No,
time.
no, he
but
didn't.
You could. Yeah, he won the award for the Pizza Fest last time, and you couldn't go.
Oh, right. Okay, well, it's not a gift card to Amazon. You know how much shit you can get on Amazon?
You could have gotten free entry into a pizza festival.
And who was the guest? Polly D?
Pauly D, yeah.
Oh my God.
I'll
Wow.
pass.
What do you mean?
I hate Polly D.
Why?
The way he looks. His hair.
You shouldn't judge.
Well, you know what? I judge. I do. He scares
You know what?
the shit out of me with his hair. He looks
He also
like
hasn't changed.
Just
for
some
like
water
over a
and
decade.
shampoo
What-
and
If you're just joining us, this is the Raben Report's 2019 Canadian election special. Yes, it is in fact the election special.
Where we talk about everything but politics. From Celine Dion to Pauly
Pauly
D,
D.
all here.
So does
Is it
anyone know
really
who
a
Justin
federal
Trudeau's wearing
election?
tonight?
I think he's wearing a white pullover.
Ooh.
Wow.
Yeah.
Not blackface.
This is why you tune in.
But honestly, it would imagine he did that
Hilarious.
just to troll all of Canada.
He's just celebrating.
Oh my God.
I find I was seeing CBC. It was keep showing coverage from his election, how their Liberal campaign headquarters or their hub or whatever their party is. And as soon as they announced the Liberals had won or were projected to win before they'd even gone any further, there was just a huge celebration with that crowd that just kept going. And I'm like, I'm all for celebrating, but look at at the end of the day, you're still gaining. You have a net loss of at least 30 seats from what CBC is projecting right now. Maybe you can pull up the gains and losses chart from the CBC site.
Yeah,
but
30.
It's right now at a net 30 loss, which obviously a majority of those went to the 21 seats that the Conservatives have picked up as a means of who they were taking those seats from. So I know you're happy that you're staying in power, but to be almost so happy about that, I feel like is
You find it's
an
desperate?
issue with. I think every party that goes from a majority to minority is going to do the same thing, but I feel like it's it's almost like celebrating in vain of the people that you're losing, but the fact that you get to hang out, like.
Well, can we just take a second to appreciate the fact that the Greens have a gain?
That's great.
Right
One.
there.
Yeah.
+1.
So
That's
much
more.
global
They're
warming or
sitting at,
whatever.
depending on how you ask, either 2 or 3 seats right now. So if they can hold on to all 3, as well as add a 4th or however many more, that in itself will be a huge win.
I think that, like what Samuel said, I think a lot of people have said that they're going to vote, like their big issue this election is climate change. And it's clear that it's not, because if it really was, you would vote Green. And if all of the people who said that voted Green, I think they would do pretty well.
Do you think you can still have one completely guiding principle without going with the party that has that principle as their focal point?
Well, I don't see how it could be completely guiding if you wouldn't vote for the party that says that that's what they'll do.
I think that goes back to our earlier conversation about strategic voting, making sure that your
Absolutely.
vote can
But if-
mitigate damage. If you, like, for example, I will admit I was a one-issue voter this election. I was solely focused on what they were willing to do for climate change. And even though I know that a Liberal government will not do enough that I want to see done for climate change in comparison to something like the Green Party, my biggest concern is mitigating any damage that a possible Conservative government might do by not doing anything about climate change. But that's still guided fully by a climate change mindset, even though I didn't end up voting for a Green Party. So I feel like that's kind of a flawed argument in the sense where just because I voted for a party that isn't doing the absolute most, I'm voting to keep the absolute least from happening.
Well, I think that's the problem with our electoral system.
Of course, it's a problem.
But I still think that if it's as near and dear to your heart as people are saying, then they would have voted for that party.
I'll agree to disagree on that front, because I think that mitigating damage that a different party who has a chance of winning could do with the power of your vote. What you could say that about any case. If all the people did this, if all the people did that, and I think it's so, like, leading up to campaigns, that's what that's what you campaign for. That's what you do those weeks of promoting your agenda and your policy for. But then when it comes down to it on election day, if you're looking at what realistically the polls are saying, and there's no chance of your vote contributing to something that could win, I don't see the flaw per se in contributing to a less than desirable outcome that still prioritizes the one issue that you have in mind.
I understand individuals looking at the polls on election day and deciding not to vote Green if the environment is their biggest concern, because, as you said, they're not going to win, and voting for the Liberals would mitigate the damage the Conservatives would do. I agree. But I just think that I don't think that as many people are taking climate change as seriously as they're saying they are, because, again, I just feel like
fair.
if they were, the people who said that, like, they could vote Green and that would make a difference. So I understand the idea of strategic voting and that the Conservatives won't do as much as the Liberals, but I still think that if you genuinely cared as much as you say you do, and it was as dire as it apparently is, you would vote Green.
Well, with a couple minutes left to the show, let's take a look at the polls happening in British Columbia. Can we pull that up on the screen? And then we're going to take a look once again at the key ridings that were mentioned earlier on in the show. So while that is being pulled up, let's talk about, again, the CBC projected a Liberal minority. Do you think that is what's going to happen?
Yeah.
Yeah?
Yes, but maybe closer than we had, or people had been anticipating.
That's what I was just
I think it's in a very small margin, especially looking at how many gains the Conservatives have made in British Columbia right now, or at least are leading in.
Also, in
It's
general,
more than half, which
the
is
numbers are so much closer than I expected them to be.
For where?
Just in general.
Okay.
I didn't expect Conservative and Liberal to be as close as they are.
We're looking at British Columbia on the screen right now.
Yeah. No, I just mean as a whole. I'm
No,
looking,
yeah. Just for our viewers to know.
Yeah.
But I see what you're saying. We're looking just at British Columbia right now. So it's basically, it looks like mostly Conservative, but a lot of NDP. Can you just go down to near Victoria? I'm just really hoping May wins her seat, just for the sake of it.
She's held on for so long, and her ratings
Not
are
the
still
right- not the
very
right
strong.
riding.
So I would be. It's Saanich Gulf Islands, and she's still, although it's very early, she's still polling ahead.
She's polling at 44%, and the second place is Liberal, polling at 23.1%.
Paul Manley, who is the other elected Green incumbent in the House in last year's, there was a by-election in Nanaimo Ladysmith. He's also polling ahead of the Conservative rival, which is worth noting because that's a seat that they could hold, which besides Elizabeth May, he's only the second ever Green Party member to hold a seat in cabinet, aside from the independent who was kicked out of the NDP caucus, who is planning to run for the Greens this election. So I'm curious to see if he as well can hold on to his seat.
Well, it's definitely something that we want to watch. Now, we have Elizabeth Mays riding Saanich Gulf Islands, as we mentioned. She's at 44.6% with the Liberal competitor 23.1%. I'm just so happy that she's winning her seat, just because, like you said, she's been holding it for so long. And she, I feel that she is genuine in her fight to fight for climate change, and she really is fighting for something that she believes in, and I think that's something that we need in a leader. And even though her policy is mainly on climate change, it doesn't look like she would be prime minister as part of the Green Party, but she's definitely a good leader, I would say. What do you think, Christina?
I do really like Elizabeth May.
Mm-hmm.
And I just like want it for her.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
And I think she's been doing this for a really long time, and she's been working at it for a really long time, and I think maybe she won't win she's not going to win federally, even though that's not an option for her. I still think
you don't think she's going to win her seat?
No, not her seat. I mean federally.
Okay.
I mean that's not a possibility, but I with that being said, her winning her seat, I think is, yeah, she deserves that. She's worked really hard. And I think the Green Party in general, this election, has gained more votes and attention than I've ever personally seen it before.
Speaking of attention, I think there's a comment on the Facebook Live feed, which is a really good point to bring up. It's by Matthew Ayres. He says,
"Oh, that's my friend from Mac." Yeah.
Nice. I think I totally agree with what he's kind of going at. With the amount of climate activism that's going on now, I think there will be a lot more pressure on the Trudeau government to do more for the environment. And I think that kind of what we're getting at is that obviously we're not looking at Elizabeth May to win. I don't think anyone was looking at her to win and become prime minister in this. I think it just speaks to have the growing presence of her and her party on how that is going to influence policy that's currently being done in the House. Yeah. I think obviously it's never going to happen, but I think it would be amazing to see a Green Party member, perhaps their views are too strict on the matter, but a Green Party member added to a Liberal cabinet.
Yeah,
I think that would be an amazing show of faith that would do a lot of good that unfortunately I'm not seeing from this Liberal government, which is why, again, it tears me to vote for Liberal, but I think that would be an amazing show of faith in the sense that you can be advocating for a bunch of things, but still prioritize an area that is so important to a lot of voters.
Well, so many demographics are changing now that the boomers are aging and that millennials are the largest voter group in Canada at the moment. So I predict a sudden shift, especially in terms of beliefs and people who are voted in, because the older generations generally support conservative versus the younger ones supporting more liberal or more progressive parties.
So with the show coming to a close, let's just basically get our final opinions on British Columbia. Is it going to swing more conservative? Is it going to swing more NDP? What are we looking at? British Columbia is not really is it a deciding factor in this election or no?
Not really.
No.
Not really?
I think the only thing it could really decide is how big of a minority government or how close to the line it toes. I don't think anything is really up to debate anymore, but we could still take a look at some of those ridings you were looking at of the ones to watch as a means of gauging whether this will be a fairly large minority gap or some that's a lot more slim than people might have been expecting.
And this is also just a question because I don't remember in the last federal election, do we typically see that the Northwest Territories are predominantly NDP?
They only have one representative, so it's not out of the question.
Yeah, I just was wondering if politically that's what we typically see is that they lean towards NDP.
Interesting take. So you think it's going to be more NDP then?
Well, I'm just looking based on the map. I'm seeing a lot of orange in Nunavut. Mm-hmm. There is some liberal, but No, it was just.
I feel like it's dependent on the person. When you have one person covering an entire territory that's of such sheer magnitude size, but a very sparse population. Like in Nunavut, for example, their longtime incumbent was Leona Aglukak, who was a member of the Harper cabinet at one point.
Yeah,
and she obviously had name recognition that maybe gave her the votes that not necessarily aligned with the conservative movement, but more so, again, a familiar name or a familiar face like we had touched on earlier.
Right. So just wrapping it up, I want to go back to the key ridings that we were talking about. So we have Milton pulled up on the screen. Lisa Raitt is behind by over 15%.
Wow.
That's very bad for her, with an incumbent who's been in power for so long. But again, Adam Van Koeverden did a good job. I saw the video he put out. He was very engaging, and he talked about coming together across party lines and making a difference. And I think that's really won him over. As well, being an Olympian, it's star power, and you really represented the country, and you showed the world what Canada can be like. And I think people are drawn to that, right? I think it's the same with Justin Trudeau. He had some sort of star power with the last name on top of his charisma, as mentioned. Let's look at Milton. We talked about Milton. York Centre.
Eglinton, Lawrence.
All of the Toronto area ones to watch are either leading or confirmed Liberal at this point, which for the most part just denotes incumbency. But again, Michael Levitt has kept his seat.
He's been elected?
Yes, he has been confirmed. Okay. Marco Mendicino is not called yet. It's still too early, but they're still leading by a fair amount. And a lot of the Toronto region, the Peel region, and for the most part, York region, minus that one confirmed conservative riding, which is Thornhill.
Peter Kent won a seat?
Yeah, that was.
Well, congratulations to Peter Kent.
Also, I just wanted to make a quick note. Yep. Jake, you're very well spoken and very smart, and this is like unrelated, but hearing you talk is like, that's unrelated, but like I study politics and I did and I couldn't word the things the way you are. So you are very smart. I just wanted to put that out there. Some recognition.
I want to give that to everybody. I think this whole group represents a really diverse amount of political opinions, but I think that not only the curiosity of wanting to hear from other people, but engage in conversations where even though we are all set in our own opinions for the most part, we want to share in that idea of why other people believe the way they do
and find common ground. That's really important.
I feel like that's
Canadians.
An amazing thing that, in this polarized kind of a landscape, people don't seem to do anymore. So I'm really fortunate to have this opportunity with all of you.
Yeah.
Only the best at the Raben Report. You guys are incredible. I'm honestly so humbled to have people like you on the show and actually talking about these things and debating civilly. And it just really brings me joy to see something that I had a vision 4 years ago, and it's still going with these incredible discussions. So thank you to all of you, honestly, from the bottom of my heart. So really appreciate it.
Does it sound like snapping?
I think so.
Well, I can see it on screen. So basically all the Toronto ridings, they're going red, really, as you were saying, Jake. Thornhill is one of the only ones that went blue. What about Markham Unionville? Now, that was one of the only two ridings in the GTA that went blue with Bob Soroya. It's just a little bit further north.
Still has a healthy lead, Bob Soroya, as does the only other leaning conservative riding right now, which is Leona Alislev in Aurora Oak Ridges, which is in itself, I think, a really strong showing for her. And I think that she could, if she chooses to, become a force to be reckoned with within the Conservative Party going forward.
And finally, let's go to King Vaughan, because that was a very contentious riding. King Vaughan looks like it is right above. Yep, right there. Wow. 5%. Deb Schultz is above. See, people didn't expect that, because from what I was hearing, King Vaughan was going to go blue, hardcore, like it did for Stephen Lecce. He won over 3 times the amount of votes in the provincial election, but clearly it's still going red. So you still think we're getting a minority, or we're getting a majority at this point with the Liberals? I mean, there was a massive loss of seats already, but Could they still pull through?
Tough to say.
I think they only
don't know.
led a majority by 15 seats.
Yep.
Yeah.
Well, they
So-
did
So
at
that's
the
less than
beginning.
0.4%.
At the beginning of 2015, they had way more, but with the four candidates who left, it obviously lowered that number. I think it's pretty safe to say it's going to be a liberal minority at this point, right? And I
Yeah.
think that's where we're going to end the show now, because
Aw.
it is just, I know, I mean, it's
Having
been
fun.
Is there anything else you want to talk about specifically?
Yeah, we should go
Celine
back to that
Dion.
Celine Dion argument.
Oh, don't worry. That'll be after the show. You guys will have to tune in next week to find out what's going on about that. But always positive there. But that was our election special. That was our live election special 2019. Thank you to everyone that tuned in and commented.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you. I was gonna say I want to thank Christina, Jake, and Moralia for being on the show, especially so last minute. You guys really added to this to the discussion. Clearly, it's late, and we really appreciate your input on this election. So thank you all for being here.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah.
It's our pleasure. And of course, thank you to the main panel, Amara, Samuel, and Jessica. You guys are an incredible team. I'm so proud of what the show has become. This is only episode 3 in the season, and the fact that we're doing a special already is a big deal. So thank you to all of you. You guys are absolutely incredible. That concludes our 3-part series on the Canadian federal election, and as such, we won't be having a show tomorrow because we'll basically be talking about the same thing, but we'll be back Tuesday, October 28th with a brand new episode of the Raben Report. Thank you, and have a good night.